Living set apart is so much more than just you growing. It's allowing other people to see the love of Jesus because a lot of people will only see the love of Jesus through you. And if you're not doing your job, they don't feel like they need it. Chris, today is a special day because a year ago today, you got saved. Bellevue Baptist Church, seeing Christmas tree, decided to give your life to the Lord. And that actually fits well with today's topic because today's topic is being set apart and the challenges with that, what comes with that, why we should do that. So talk about your, journey of being ultimately set apart as a Christian, moving from your non-Christian phase and now into this life.
Yeah, dude. So a year ago today, December 10th, 2022, um, that is when I gave my life to Jesus. And basically, before that, I was just kind of self obsessed. I uh, was really prideful, especially when it came to the gym and just like my body. I was trying to be like a big bodybuilder dude, you know?
Mhm.
And I had problems with cussing and pornography, stuff like that. So it was just a bunch of really bad habits, and it caused me to just not be a very good or nice person, especially at school. I'm sure you could tell. You could see me walking around the halls. I never looked really happy.
You've got a very mean resting face, and
I
it was
do,
very intimidating.
and I feel like I still do, especially when I'm like not around people I know. But it's not like I'm actually mad anymore. I
Yeah.
used to just be like unhappy, but I saw one of my friends. I saw him kind of come to the Lord, and I saw the big life change that he had. And that's one of the things that just really made me want to experience that for myself. So that's why I ended up going to the Singing Christmas Tree, which is a play that they do at Bellevue Baptist. And yeah, that's just the night that I got saved. And ever since then, I've just been a new person. So
So right directly after you got saved, I remember you called me and one of the guys, and you're like, "Hey, like this is what just happened," and you didn't really know like how big of a deal it was. And then the next day, you started experiencing all of these convictions. Talk about your first experience standing up for your faith and what happened and the ins and outs of it.
yeah, so you're right. The very next day, it was actually Sunday, so that was my first Sunday church service as a Christian. So that was cool. Got to sit with you, and
Yeah, baby,
so.
you
But
cried.
I did
It
cry.
was sweet.
I'm an emotional person. Okay, I still cry sometimes at church.
I
So
remember when my mom looked over at you and saw you crying, she just like burst out in tears. That was a big moment for her. But
surprised she didn't laugh.
now you know Miss Amy, so but no,
Yeah, she would laugh at me now.
it gave her a lot of joy to see you
But
like
Miss
that.
Amy is the best, so it's
Hmm.
okay. She can laugh at me. But yeah. So where were we going with that?
Like, so you had your first experience after you got saved, standing up for your faith. You went to
Oh
that church
yeah,
service and then talk
yeah,
about that day.
yeah. So was it that day that I had dinner with?
I think it was.
I think it might have been that day. So basically, I was hanging out with two. They're really like solid dudes. Like they were good friends to me and everything. But I started feeling convicted about hanging out with them because I was so new. I guess I was so new to the faith that like I just felt convicted about being around them because I knew that it was going to be really hard for me to cut out some of my bad habits if I was just living in the same community that I was in. So I just felt like I needed to kind of talk to them and just see how they reacted. And I think they didn't react in the way that I needed them to. So I just knew I had to kind of step out of those friendships, at least for a little bit. So that's just what I did. And that gave me a lot of room to kind of grow closer to you and some of the other guys. And that's just kind of my first experience of being set apart from the old lifestyle that I was living in.
So when you say they didn't react the way that you needed them to, what do you mean by that? How did you expect them to go about your decision?
What's the word? So, what does apathetic mean?
Apathetic is just disinterest, like you're not showing any effort at all.
I would say that's kind of the reaction I got, at least from one of them. And the other one was just kind of fighting me on it a little bit on like what it really looks like to be a Christian. So I just like I don't have anything against those guys. I never have, I never will. Like I
Mm.
don't. They were good guys, but I just knew that I needed like-minded people to be around, at least for the first few months as a Christian, because that was just my personal conviction. Is I just knew I couldn't grow in that same environment.
Mm. Okay, it's interesting that you say that because a lot of people that grow up in the church and then get associated with maybe groups they don't need to be in more have trouble with that first step that you took and just mentioning that they're saved. When you that it seemed like it just came as second nature because I remember you sent that text to us and you're like, "Hey, just told the guys about my faith. They didn't really react in the way that I needed to, but I did it." And we were just like, "Wow." The boldness that you had to do that just being saved like this weekend, that's crazy because for us, that's the hard part. The hard part is to do that. The hard part isn't to shut yourself apart in every other way. It's to actually bring it up and then, suffer what most would call consequences because of that. So I find that fascinating that, you did that with such obedience and then more of the struggles were after that happened because you're like, man, these friendships may not be what I need.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think the reason that happened is just because I was so like I knew that I probably needed to do this like a long time ago. So I think I was just so excited and like joyful that I finally knew the Lord that I didn't really care about what I would lose.
Mm.
So I think that's a little bit of a difference between someone that grows up in the church and someone that doesn't. Is like I just found all that joy just came all at one time instead of just coming in slowly over time.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's the journey that I've had really. I mean, most people knew that I was a good kid. They knew that I didn't cuss, I didn't smoke, I didn't do any of that stuff. I didn't vape. And because of that, I was already naturally set apart. But in my opinion, it was for the wrong reasons. It was because I was a good kid, not because I was a Christian, right? And because of that, I was naturally left out of a lot of things, even in tight circles. There were things that I wasn't invited to because I was that person who wasn't going to partake. Maybe I wasn't going to boldly say, "Hey, I'm not going to do this," but I was still not going to do it. Like they knew that was me. But I think the first time where I had an experience like you did, where I stood up in front of people that maybe I wasn't really comfortable with, was sophomore year. It was in a business class, and the teacher gave us an assignment. Um, Keep in mind, prior to this, I had not really, shared my faith at school really at all, except for like one time I shared my testimony at student ministry. And so I got the opportunity to do this, and I chose to do my random presentation on hell and heaven. And I just felt led to do it. I was scared to death. I was shaking the whole time, but I knew that's what God wanted me to do. And I didn't know anyone in my class, so it made it a little bit easier because it wouldn't be a situation where, oh, why is this guy just now talking about his faith? We've gone to school together for 10 years now. It wasn't like that because I didn't know anybody. So I talked about hell and heaven. I was like, hey, this is the verse that says if you don't accept Jesus Christ, you're going to hell. And I just went through that presentation. And that was the first time where I was like, okay, maybe I can actually live out my faith and be set apart, but not experience the consequences because I didn't have any direct ramifications from that except for just walking out of that class and going to the next period. So that I didn't really experience all the kind of what you did, being left by some people because of my faith. It was more just like, yeah, let's not talk to that random sophomore.
How would you say that your life has kind of been different ever since that first step of just trying to set yourself apart from the rest of your classmates and stuff like that?
Hmm. It more put expectations on me made by me because I was like, these guys now, they see me as the Jesus kid. They see me as the Christian that's not just going to go to church on Sundays. They see me as, okay, this guy's going to present a topic about Jesus, right? So it gave me a lot of motivation to live out my faith at school in a way that I hadn't before because I was like, wow, this is what people expect of me. And maybe that was the wrong motivation going in, but because of that, it gave me a pure heart. And it said, okay, I got to live for Jesus because that's what I'm called to do, right? I just needed some motivation to get in that. And honestly, expectations from other people was my lead in for those things. But that's what got me into, actually pursuing the Lord and reading my Bible for the first time. And I was like, if I'm going to live out my faith in school, I've got to know the word. I can't just read the Bible on Sundays and Wednesdays and expect to have a knowledge of it. No, I've got to read it every day. I've got to digest it. I've got to pray. I've got to have silence and solitude before the Lord. And that's, ultimately what propelled those things.
Mm. So it seems like setting yourself apart it doesn't only like show people that you're serious about your faith. It also leads to growth.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Because it shows yourself that you can get uncomfortable and feel the joy from that. Because a lot of times we view getting uncomfortable as, oh wow, I don't want to go in that situation. I don't want to feel that way afterwards. But in reality, like joy and peace comes through that. Right. And I know that, that it's a little bit harder in secular circles, but also it's harder in Christian circles. So what's a situation you've been in since you've been saved inside the Christian circle with good people, godly people, but you still felt led to be set apart in a certain way?
Yeah. So back at home, I've had some like opportunities with like specific people. I would say like girls, like just wanting to hang out in like one on one or two on two scenarios that just like aren't not like safe places, kind of like at a house or just something like that. I don't think something like that is smart unless you're already like really good friends and there's no bad intentions between any of the people.
That's so tough.
Yeah. So that's kind of something that I've struggled with since I've been saved. It's just like, how do you say no to those things when like part of you wants to do it because we're imperfect people and part of us, I guess, wants to see what would happen. But it's just setting yourself apart, even within the Christian community, can just have such a big impact on your journey.
Wow. That's really tough, especially for guys, because guys like attention. guys like feeling like that. Man, I had a question for you. Like, because okay, let's say like for you that situation wouldn't have been wrong. Like it would have been fine to hang out with those people back home, right? It would have been cool because you're fine, you're solid in your faith, everything's gonna be fine. But what if you think the other people are the ones with the wrong intentions? Like how do you be set apart in those situations?
Hmm. Well, I think that I can't remember what verse it is, but it's talking about like do not cause a brother to stumble.
Mm.
I think if someone might have the wrong intentions, then I think the best thing you can do is to separate yourself from that person because you could be causing them to like idolize the idea of you or something like that. So I think that really it's just as wrong for you to go if you think that you're fine, but they're not. I think it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, like not partaking in that situation would be handling that out of love. And also, if you feel led not to take part in a certain situation, just to be set apart, you may think that you're fine and it's the other person's problem. But also, if the Lord's leading you not to do that, then there's a reason behind that. And typically, like I said, for us guys, especially teenage guys, like that's a problem sometimes. Is we want to throw the blame card on everybody else and say, "Oh, I'm not going to do this because that person might fall." When in reality, if you were to partake in that situation, you would be idolizing that person, right? So a lot of times you have to do a lot of self-reflection and say, "Okay, what can I do here that is not sinful, but in reality, it's actually growing me closer to the Lord?" And if you're making an action that isn't an effort to grow your fellowship with God and isn't to grow closer with God, then you need to question if that's an action you need to take in the first place. There should never be a stagnant option that you choose just because you don't think you're going to fall into sin, right? So I think being set apart is very, very important. And I wanted to more move this conversation to another side and talk more about in the Christian community, a lot of people, like I just talked about, they really compromise their faith in certain parts. What is maybe, since you've been saved, a situation or even a topic that you've seen Christians compromise because they don't think it's as big of a sin, and in reality, they're leading themselves astray and others astray along with them?
I would say one is maybe drinking. I think I think a lot of Christians, they'll bring up the verse in the Bible. They'll bring up like drink wine and stuff like that, but they'll kind of forget about the part where it says to not get drunk, you know. And I think that even me personally, I'm not gonna drink like I probably ever, just because I think that even like allowing that in gives the opportunity for you to possibly keep drinking and enjoy it and end up getting drunk. So I just don't think I'm going to entertain that at all. But I don't think that it is a sin I don't think it's a sin to drink, but I do know it's a sin to get drunk. So I think a lot of people kind of leave out that second half of that, and they just drink and they say that they don't do it to get drunk, but really they're lying to themselves. So
And when you entertain it like that, a lot of times you use comparison to rationalize your decisions to drink little bits, right? Because you don't go all the way like that person. You don't do what that person did. As long as you do that, you're fine. But in reality, I'm not positive. You can correct me on this, but like everybody's level of getting intoxicated is different, right? So like you can drink a lot, I can drink a little, but maybe we don't get drunk, either of us. Is that right? Is that how it works?
yeah. People's I guess what's it called? I don't even remember what
I don't
it's
know the
called.
word either.
Is it like tolerance level?
Tolerance, that's what it is.
Is that what
Yes.
it is? Yeah. Okay. Some people have a much higher tolerance to alcohol than other people.
Yeah. I personally don't think it's a good idea. Because let's say you're in a situation with a non-Christian who looks at a Christian and says, "Hey, drinking is not okay. Like it's not okay at all." Because that's just what they've heard. But this Christian is going out with this non-Christian and they're drinking high amounts of alcohol. Number one, that Christian's going to be like, or that non-Christian's going to be like, "What is that Christian doing? Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. I thought this person was supposed to be set apart." Because it talks about in Romans 2 how even the Jews or even the Gentile, or no, it was the Jews would blame Christians and condemn Christians for them sinning because they had the law written on their hearts. So non-believers will be able to call believers out on sins if they allow it to go too far. So not only that, but also that non-Christian can look at that Christian and say, okay, I'm living the same way this Christian is living. Why would I need Jesus? Because we're living the same life. If you're not showing any fruit, if you're not being set apart, then you give non-Christians a way out and they think that they're justified because they see your example and they're like, why would I need Jesus if we're doing the exact same thing? And that just takes out the heart of who Jesus really is, and it makes it more of a good works mentality because that person thinks they can just be a Christian without, having a genuine relationship with Jesus and repenting of those sins.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely just something that I feel like Christians shouldn't be playing with, especially if they're trying to be a light and be an example to other unbelievers, But what's another thing that you think is, what's the word?
Just like wrong, like allowing evil in. We can briefly cover this one, but I was talking to a guy a while back, and he was mentioning how he's struggled with being addicted to like weed and things like that, and that's a problem. This is a non-Christian, by the way, and he was referencing how whenever he did this, he was like feeling evil inside of him, like before he was saved, like every time he did it, he just felt like there was something evil inside of him. And we can even bring up vaping and things like that. The Bible says, keep your body as a temple, right? Your body is a temple before the Lord. You're made in his image. You can even talk about gluttony with this. Like, why would you fill your body with those evil things that can very easily become addictions, right? And I know people use it for medicine and things like that, but also people use alcohol for medicine. And that can easily be a gateway into something more if you allow it to be. So that's just one thing that I think Christians cannot afford to play with at all, because it looks like the world too. What about you? What's another topic that we have to be set apart in? Like there should be no discussion on it.
I think this is something that a lot of Christians, especially guys, will keep private or just try not to talk about, but definitely lust. And it's even like in stuff in private, like masturbation, viewing pornography. I think that if you're doing that even in private, it's going to hinder how set apart you are when you go out in public. So if you're constantly doing that and you're separated from God, then how are you supposed to be set apart when your mind is just focused on those other things and you're just thinking about what you did last night and how bad you feel about it? So
Wow. Yeah, you can't live set apart and encouraged when you're just suffering in shame and no one knows about it, right? I think that's a great point. A great point. It is so hard for me growing up. I know you can't relate to this, but growing up in a Christian circle, it was really hard to be set apart because I would justify my actions because I was a Christian and I did it around my Christian friends. Does that make sense? So a lot of things that probably worldly people were doing, like making bad jokes and talking about things we shouldn't and viewing things we shouldn't and joking about that and like listening to really bad music, things like that. Doing that in a Christian community made me feel fine about it because I was like, oh, Christians do this. It's okay. But in reality, like a lot of times, for me at least, I had to separate myself more and set myself apart more inside my Christian community than I really had to at my school. Because that was natural, honestly. Like people just knew I was a good kid because I didn't use cuss words, right? But at church, like I usually justified my actions when in reality that I really wasn't being obedient to what God wanted me to do at all.
Yeah, you can't water down your own convictions just based on how other people
Mm.
are acting.
Wow.
Because if you do that, then you're probably going to end up becoming friends with the wrong people at church, and then you're just going to be completely led astray.
Hmm.
Honestly, so
Wow.
I would honestly like encourage anyone that's, let's say you're friends with a bunch of people and they're doing things that you know for sure are sins. I would argue that you should try and separate yourself from those people, especially if they're claiming to be Christians and love the Lord, and they're going out and just being completely disobedient. I would challenge them to try and set themselves apart physically and try and find new friends that they're going to be able to, new friends that are going to kind of be able to encourage them and just grow with them. So,
And if you're not willing to do that, it honestly shows that you have a people pleasing mentality and that you'd rather be liked than respected for who you are. Right? The Bible says to be blameless before God. Be blameless before God, not necessarily before man, because man's going to convict you of things and condemn you of things that aren't true. That's what they did to Jesus. Right? Jesus lived a completely perfect life and man still hated on him for that. Right? So people are going to try to do that to you. Right? They're going to try, but you have to be blameless. You have to be blameless. It doesn't matter what little Jimmy thinks about you. No, it doesn't matter at all, right? We value too much of what people care about and how people view us and how people care about us to validate if we're doing well in our Christian life or not. We should wake up every day and compare ourselves to God alone so we don't make idols of people. Making idols of people will lead you completely astray of what God's will is for your life, completely. And it'll set you back in your sanctification too.
yeah. I would say that honestly, sometimes just being straight up with people and telling them the truth so they respect you, I would argue that honestly that could make them like you more too in a way.
Oh my goodness, that's so good.
Because you
So
know
good.
one of our friends, she's a girl, and we asked her if she would want to help us out with the podcast and help us like set stuff up and just kind of be our producer and stuff like that. And at first she was excited about it, but then she realized like that's not very smart for me to just be in these two guys' apartment and even though what we're doing is for the right thing, it's just even setting herself up in that position where something bad could happen or you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so what she did is she just told us straight up, hey guys, I don't think as a Christian woman that I should be in your apartment with just you two.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, that made me respect her more, and it makes me like her more as a friend just because she was willing to do that. So,
Exactly. Man, that is so true, bro. I have another example to add on to that. That is perfect. And also, it was really convicting for us because, like, man, we probably need to be smarter too. Like, even if everybody has the right intentions, you still can't set yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
But I was in a situation where back home, I had a friend who was always doing the wrong thing. He was showing up in church and he was, acting like a Christian, but when he, went to school and things like that, he would act like a completely different person. And he was totally fine owning up to the fact that he was a hypocrite. Totally fine with that. And it did not come to a point where me and a couple guys decided, hey, we're not just going to let this guy push us around anymore. We're going to call him out for this stuff. And it was totally a God moment. It was the perfect time for it. And Jesus set it up. And we were just like, hey, bro, like you can't even talk. He was going to preach a sermon. Now we're like, dude, you can't even talk about this topic because you are living a complete lie. And this man was saved, but he needed someone to say that. And in reality, that guy's one of my best friends to this day, even when we're not even going to school in the same state, even when we don't talk very much, we have an understanding and a respect for each other because actually he grew to like me more and become better friends with me because I was willing to call him out for that stuff. And that for me was a scary moment because I was like, what if this guy's not going to respect me? What if he hates me? What if he doesn't talk to me anymore? But I was like, you know what? I think that his sanctification and him getting out of his sin is a lot more important than me being liked. And when you decide to put your pride down and someone else's faith up, That's when true friendship, if it needs to be true friendship, will grow and will cultivate into something you can't even imagine. And that guy's living on fire for the Lord right now. Like that's just the ramifications of what, doing that causes. And like you said, it's the same situation with that girl too. You've got to be willing to call out the people that you care about and do it in love, of course, because man, it grows your friendships more than ever.
Yeah. What would you say is like a good way? Let's say you're invited to something you know you shouldn't go to, but you're kind of dealing with someone that's a little bit more like trying to shame you for not wanting to do this thing, but you know it's wrong. How do you go about, I guess, talking to them about that?
I think you need to be firm, definitely be firm. And there comes a point where you got to say, hey, like, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. Stop asking me. And ultimately that person will respect that, hopefully. If it's a relationship or a friendship you need to have, that person will respect that. They need to, where it's not something you need to be a part of. But also you cannot allow them to push you over and then actually like influence you to actually do the bad thing that you don't need to do. Right? That was the situation I was in a lot of times back home.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
What would you say?
I mean, yeah, you can't allow someone trying to guilt trip you. You can't allow that to change your mind on like what you're doing. Like you need to be firm about every answer that you give. And I mean, yeah, that's pretty much it. You can't allow other people to sway your thought process. So
Absolutely. This is one quote I heard a long time ago, but don't lower your standard just because the people you need to. No, sorry, let me start over. I want to get it right. Don't lower your standard just because people aren't meeting it. Right? If you have a standard for friendship and you say, hey, I will only allow close friends into my life who are on fire for the Lord and doing all this and that, and you allow someone in just because you want to be liked or you care about that person thinking a certain way about you, then you have just compromised your own integrity. Right? So if you have a standard for how you want to live, don't lower it to meet other people's expectations, because it's a lot easier to be dragged down than to pull up. Right? And that's a situation that, when you don't take a stand in that, it ultimately leads to your downfall in ways.
yeah, and I think that this topic wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about like how do you overcome like the feeling of being left out when it comes to trying to set yourself apart, because that's definitely something that like I personally struggle with a lot,
I guess a situation I can briefly go over is like in 10th grade, we had like this huge group chat from church kids, and like it was like 25 or 30 people, and we always tried to do everything together. And in reality, that wasn't a good idea, because you don't need to be friends with everybody. And because of that, me and a couple guys were like, okay, like we've got to have a core here that is just going to, ride and die together. So we made that. And yes, it sacrificed some intentionality that I would have with some awesome people and some great people, but also it allowed me to have a group where I can go and tell anything to, and I trust them. Right. And because of that, there were situations you see on social media or you hear about like, oh, this group hung out and I wasn't even invited. I didn't even know about it. And of course that hurts. It stings a little bit because you're like, man, I could have been there. If I wouldn't have taken this stand, I would have been at that place. But in reality, you have to realize, oh my goodness, it doesn't matter if I'm left out or not. Yes, it's going to sting for a little bit, but in reality, if you make the right decision to do something, then you should not feel the shame of being left out, because ultimately that's from the devil, and he's trying to get you to question that decision that you made. But that was the situation for me in the church. It wasn't as drastic as what you went through. So touch on that a little bit after you had to say to your friends, hey, I'm saved now. Like, I don't know if I can do this.
I guess it was hard for me because the people that I kind of stopped hanging out with, they weren't just my friends, they were like my workout partners. Like they were the people that I went to the gym and they pushed me and stuff like that. So I guess like kind of seeing on Snapchat, seeing them at the gym together, I was like, man, I could have been there. But I think there was just so much growth that I had early on because I was willing to kind of take a step back from those friendships that honestly, I don't even know if that's something I really thought about that often, to be honest, because I found so much joy in growing and coming closer to God that those problems in the end didn't really matter, I guess.
Do you think you can say that, to anybody, don't be afraid to set yourself apart? Like, is that something you can say from experience? Like, don't be afraid because it will work out. It will pan out in a way that you can't even imagine.
Absolutely. Like you cannot be if you're afraid to be set apart, then I don't think you're ever going to really grow and you're never going to reach the potential that you could reach. And I would say that I'm still not there. I'm definitely never going to get to my full potential because there's just, I'm human. And I make mistakes. But if you want to even grow towards that, then you can't allow other people's opinions on you or just the feeling of being left out to just hinder that growth. So
Wow.
don't be afraid.
Wow. I'll speak to this. Like, I didn't really talk about this at all, but one reason that I was so afraid to get rid of my lustful temptation, not was because I wanted it so bad, because I didn't. I hated it. It was more because I can't even imagine how God may use me if I give up this idol in my life. A lot of times we're afraid to be set apart because we're actually afraid of what God could do through us. And that is something that we do not need to be afraid of because, yes, the world may hate you for it. Yes, people may make fun of you because you're a goody two-shoes or you're a try-hard, things like that. I've gotten all of those terms called at me before. But in reality, you can still rejoice. You can still rejoice. And you cannot rejoice if you're not willing to set yourself apart because you're going back to the same dark, boring lifestyle. And a lot of Christians do that too. They go back to the same dark and boring lifestyle every single night and they're entertaining evil and they're falling away from the Lord because they're scared of what God would do with them. And they're scared of letting go of their pride with actually living out who God wants them to be. You cannot be afraid of that. You cannot be afraid because there's so much joy on the other side. Like look at the disciples. All of them left behind everything just to follow Jesus. And yes, a lot of them were martyred for their faith, but they've been in heaven for 2,000 years. 2,000 years. I'm willing to bet that it was worth those 40 to 50 years of going through a little bit of pain, but also getting to walk alongside the Messiah. Like there is so much joy in that. There is.
Yeah, that's a great point. How are you feeling about this topic?
I'm feeling good. I'm so passionate about like what it looks like to be set apart because not only does it affect you, but I think hypocrites in the Christian walk, and I was this for so long, Christians in the Christian walk are so dangerous to how people view Christianity and how they actually want Christianity.
Okay, yeah, I will say that is one thing that honestly made me a little iffy about church. Was the fact that I just thought everyone was just hypocrites, which we are. We sin against God every day, but it's just like the Christians that I know are going to church and then going and living a completely different life afterwards. I saw that and I was just like, what's the point? So being a hypocrite as a Christian it's not only killing you, it's leading others astray and making them think that Jesus isn't who everyone says he is,
Wow. And just think about it this way, like your actions may be the reason they never came to Christ. Like you're the reason for that. Paul said that he would give up his eternity for someone else. When a lot of times we're going about our day not seeking out intentional conversations with non-believers because we're scared. And then the blood's on our hands for not, leading them to who Jesus is. And that's a scary thought. It's living set apart is so much more than just you growing. It's allowing other people to see the love of Jesus because a lot of people will only see the love of Jesus through you. And if you're not doing your job, they don't feel like they need him.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just being set apart is not something that's easy to do, but it's definitely something that will bring you way more joy than living in fear. So,
wow. If you set yourself apart for the right reasons, it is the most selfless thing you can do, which that sounds, like backwards, but it's not because other people will see that and want Jesus too, because they see your light shining on a hill. So,
yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 8 of the King of Hearts podcast. We kind of got rid of the colors a little bit. We kind of figured out that the lighting was a little bit too dark with all the colors, and it was a little bit distracting. So yeah, this is kind of like the new setup for now, at least. And I don't know, I like it.
Yeah,
it's just it's simple, but it's comfortable,
less stressful.
Yeah, it's definitely less
stressful.
Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and yeah, we'll see you next week.
Peace.